Folks, would you really prepare a cake in this way? I guess no, but this is what can happen when we use an ORM like Hibernate, and unfortunately, often we realize it only when our software is live in a production environment. So, see you at the desk and let's dive in deep in now to prevent this problem. Come on. Company, employee, an evergreen of the one-to-many relationships. Let's materialize it. Here we go. This is our shining ERP to manage companies and employees. We have a paginated list of companies with the total number of employees which work for them, and a list of paginated employees with the company name they work for. Well, we would expect our software run one query, let's say this big query, select from company, join employee, but actually it runs n queries. One from company and n queries from employee. Let's check at the console. Let's clear all. Let's refresh again the list of companies. So we have a query from table companies with a limit because the list of companies is paginated, and we have a count from company to display the total number of companies and the number of pages, and we have a query from employees, another query from employees, another query from employees, and so on. How many are the queries? One for fetch the companies and n queries to fetch the associated employees, because for each company we display the total number of employees. So if we have this page 10 companies, we run 10 queries from the table employees.
What?
It's like to make a cake and go to the grocery for each ingredient, isn't it? This is called N+1 Query Problem, and sometimes we don't know we are affected by it until we face performance issues in production. It partially depends on how we annotate the JPA entities and partially depends on how we make the queries. I've just created a repository to study the problem. You can reach it out at the end of the video. You can find the reference in the video description. Okay, new class, company. We annotate it with @entity. We associate it to a table called companies. It has an identifier, a name, and a list of employees. We annotate this field with one-to-many, and the association is owned by a field called company of the class employee. So now we create the other entity, employee. We associate it to the table employees. It has an identifier, of course. An employee has a first name, a last name, and the associated company. In this case, the association is a many-to-one. The joint column is foreign key underscore company. I created previously a migration script for Liquibase in order to create a table company and initialize it with 10 companies, and to create the table employees and initialize it with a bunch of employees. And now we create a company repository, transactional, and we extend JPA repository. And we do the same for the employee repository. I created an integration test for the company service. The last assertion is to verify the presence of the N+1 query problem. So we expect a number of fetch query equals to the number of the page size. So we have 5 companies, we are going to fetch 5 companies, and we expect to have 5 extra queries for the employees. This is the N+1 query problem. So let's run the test. Test passed. If we look at the queries, we can notice that we have a query for company and a lot of query from the table employees, and a total of 7 queries. What happened? Let's get in details. In the integration test, we call the method list of the company service and the method, and later the method find all of the company repository. The find all is inherited from the JPA repository. Look at we are fetching a page of companies. This line results into have 2 queries. The first one is a select from companies with a limit because we are fetching a page, and the second one is to count the total number of companies in the table. In the following line, we have the conversion from the list of companies in a list of company DTO. Let's open either the company entity and the company DTO. Are quite similar, but the company DTO has a list of employee DTO instead of course, a list of entity employees. We have a one-to-many association that by default has a fetch type lazy. So this means that the list of employees is actually fetched only when we try to access to it. And this is exactly the moment. So the getter for each company results into have 1 extra query. That is this. Given a company which are iterating for, we have a select from employees where the employee's company is exactly that. And this happens for all company. That was for the entity company, but the most surprising thing is that happens also for the entity employee. It's more surprising because the association with the company is a many-to-one association, and by default this type of association is eager. So I expected a big query like this with a select from employees join companies, but that's not true. We have one only query to fetch the company, and immediately later to that we have n queries, one for each employee, to get the associated company. This time this not happens at the conversion because the association is not lazy but eager. So Hibernate runs the extra n queries immediately later the first one. So folks, eager is not the solution of the N+1 query problem. Very interesting, but what's the solution? Now we add a new method at the company repository and we specify a custom JPI query from company join fetch employees. And we add also a count query because we are fetching a page of company and the count query is required. The important point is exactly this join fetch. We are forcing Hibernate to run one only query joining company and employee in a one only query instead of n query. I wrote a new integration test based on this new added method. Now we run it, and at the end we assert that the extra fetch query to run the associated employees for the company are 0. That's it, the test passed, and total number of queries are 2, one to fetch the list of company and the other one to count the companies. No other extra queries. The solution works for the one-to-many association as well as a many-to-one association. So, opening the employee repository, we can do the same. We can add a new method and we specify a custom query from employee join fetch company. Company in this case is not a collection, but it works as well. I showed you the solution based custom JPA query, but there are several ways to achieve the same. For instance, through JPA specification, we can call the findAll method specifying a specification like this, in which we add at the root the method fetch based on the one-to-many association on employees. Or if you prefer, through criteria builder, we can specify on the root the fetch against the one-to-many association of employees. Actually, there is another method which is based on annotations. So we can annotate a method of company repository with @entityGraph, and we can specify the name of the field that we want to join in the same query. If you ever faced the N+1 query problem, you could have found some articles which suggest to switch the fetch mode from the default one, which is fetch mode join, to the fetch mode subselect. The claim is that instead of having n extra queries, you will have one only extra query to fetch the entire lazy collection. That's true, but I don't suggest it for two reasons. See this use case. I switch the fetch mode to subselect now, and I run again the integration test to find that the queries are more than before. Looking at the logs, we can see the usual main query from the table company with a limit, the other usual query to get the count of companies, and the extra query to fetch all the associated employees with a subselect. And after we have a select from company, another select from companies, another select from companies, a lot of queries from companies, and this because the employee has a many-to-one association with company, which is eager. Every time an employee is fetched with the fetch mode subselect, another extra query is required to fetch the company. Therefore, we have again the N+1 query problem. There is a second drawback regarding the subselect. Look at again the main query to fetch the companies with the limit, and scroll down to the query to fetch the employees with the subselect. The subselect has lost the limit. Supposing the table companies was a massive table with millions of records, the performance hit could be severe. Okay folks, we are at the end. Let's summarize in few tips. First of all, in front an entity with a one-to-many association, don't use fetch type picker, use the default lazy. Avoid the fetch mode subselect, use the default one. Dealing with entity with a many-to-one association, you can leave the default fetch type picker. The fetch type lazy is preferable because later we specify the join at the query. With regard to the query, put explicitly a join fetch in the JPI query. We can do that with the JPI specification or in the criteria builder, or you can enforce the join fetch with the annotation @entityGraph. And finally, important, do that even if the association is a many-to-one. In this case, we are using a join fetch against a nested object, not a collection. Here, in Italy, we have a common saying, which is not all the donuts end up with the hole. We stand for sometimes things don't end up as planned. This time, yes. See you and have your bits well aligned.